Jeg er på elbilsmesse, men ikke hvilken som helst en af slagsen. Den her nemlig arrangeret af Fully Charge, som er en af verdens førende kanaler inden for elbiler. Og vi har været så heldige at få lov at snakke med Robert, som har startet kanalen, og med Jack, som udover at være en høj og flot fyr, også har prøvet alle de elbiler, som du måske skal ud og prøve. De skal hjælpe os med at få aflevet nogle af de myter, du måske går rundt og tror på. In the flash, seen on the screen a lot. Jeg er kæmpe fan. Nu vil vi se, om jeg kan klare det her interview uden at besvime. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. So how many cars would you guess that you'd sort of reviewed over the years in total?
I mean, I think it's fair to say between all of us, so Elliot in China, Jack here, me here, more or less all of them. There might be occasionally we'll see one we go, well, I've never been in that one, but okay. Between all of us.
So you're the right guys to talk to about busting some myths.
The only downside for me is I can't remember. So somebody I say, oh, that's lovely, and they go, yeah, you drove that 2 years ago, and I go, oh god.
But myth busting.
Why is that important to you guys?
I think because there's a lot of myths around. It's a very popular thing, and my argument now is the problems with electric vehicles are psychological, not technological.
The electric vehicle uptake is growing as fast as it is because more and more people are buying them. It's not stopping it from happening.
I really wanted to talk about three things. I want to talk about the range anxiety that's still out there. I want to talk about the price, which still is too high according to some, and also the sustainability. So is there any reason why you shouldn't go buy an EV today?
New electric cars, not that cheap.
No.
New cars in general, not that cheap.
But the cheaper ones are hugely cheaper now than they were 10 years ago.
Big time.
So it's going in that direction. They are getting cheap. The arguments there are, and we're still waiting for it, and I think it's 2025 when we'll see the first crossover where there will be an electric car on the market that is cheaper than the cheapest petrol car. It's going to happen. If you look at the wholesale price of batteries now, it's well below $100 a kilowatt hour. Well, that was always considered the tipping point when you can, not necessarily anyone will, but you can produce an electric car for less money than a petrol or diesel.
It's certainly true that when the electric cars first came along, there were a lot of really big expensive ones, but what we can see around us right now is that there is more and more availability of smaller, simpler, cheaper options, and then second-hand electric cars as well.
Maybe don't buy a new car. I never bought new cars when I was a young person. I didn't even know people who bought new cars. So, that's a real big jump. It's only since electric vehicles that I've had anything remotely like new cars. But what's happening now is the second-hand market is growing incredibly quickly because there's now enough electric cars around that there's going to be second-hand ones. What we're seeing here is second-hand lease cars. So that you don't have to buy it, you lease it, but it's going to be so much cheaper, and it's so hard to really explain why they're cheaper to use to people who've never used one. And it's the maintenance. It's where you have to take a petrol car in for a service or a diesel car in for a service, and it needs new spare parts, and it needs an oil change, and it needs air filters. None of that in an electric car.
So you shouldn't be worried about buying a used EV.
No.
Unless your nearest shop is 600 kilometres away, and on a daily basis you're doing.
That's the entire length of Denmark. So
really examine the modes of transport we use and ask the question like, is that the right vehicle for this job, or is there something smaller and cheaper that would do a better job?
Okay, let's go to myth number 2, which is the range or the lack thereof. Is the range a problem today? People every time we put up a new charger, people are saying, well, it's not in my backyard, so I can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And we're trying to say it's not in your backyard you need it, it's where you're going to.
The most convincing argument I've used is bladder range. So the human body, if you were at your house and you sat still in an armchair for 9 hours, concentrating on something, it's really bad for you, not only psychologically for your exhaustion, but for your body, and you don't get up to have a wee, not once in that 9 hours. That's what men claim they do in cars. So bad for you. You've got to get up and stretch and move your body, and also use the facilities. And my bladder range, that's how I judge a car. My bladder range is about 170 to 200 miles. So I feel I'm proud of that.
That's precise.
That is precise, and that's from tests, numerous tests. Well, 90% of the cars here can do more than that. So they've got more range than I have. Absolutely. So my range is, I'm going to say I've got a 200-mile range, which is on a good day when I haven't drunk too much coffee.
Yeah.
It's funny you say it, because as we usually say that the bladder is full before the battery is empty.
Yes.
And then make our big charging stations are meant to be these meaningful breaks where that's charging, you're having a slash, and then you just walk around in nature and sort of recharge yourself.
big long drive and you have to use service station rapid chargers, I've had experiences where they've been annoyingly fast. Like I go to the bathroom,
you haven't got time.
I buy some lunch, and the car's ready. I have to go.
And you don't want to leave it in the charge point so someone else can use it.
And lastly, myth number 3, sustainability. Some people argue that the production of EVs are going to offset the benefits from driving without the tailpipe emissions. Are EVs as clean as they claim to be?
That's the myth that gets my goat. So then people go, oh, it takes more energy to make an electric car, so it's worse for the planet. And we've got the go-to answer for this, don't we?
Well, I mean, it is that thing where it was the thing that annoyed me the most when someone, a scientist, explained it to me, that we measure tailpipe emissions from a petrol or diesel car. So we measure when you burn that fuel in that car, we measure what comes out the tail.
As if that car just came into existence.
And as if the petrol and diesel was literally made by fairies in a little box at the petrol station. And that's never considered. Little key things like people really made a fuss about cobalt in batteries and where cobalt comes from. Well, already all the new variations of vehicles and batteries don't have any cobalt. Where is cobalt used? In enormous amounts in the fossil fuel refining industry. In oil refineries, cobalt is used to remove sulfur from diesel and petrol. They don't tell you that. So you kind of learn these things slowly but surely, and then what about you dig up a big hole in the ground and you dig out copper and you make an electric car out of that? What happens to that copper? Well, you use it again. And that's the really big change, is we are seeing now in the high 90% of materials in a battery pack can be reused to make new batteries. It's not like it can in theory, it's actually happening. So there'll be someone in America who had a flip phone in the 90s with an aerial, and that flip phone's been mashed up, the battery's been recycled, and it's now in a Tesla Model 3. The materials from that phone are in that battery. They are recycling millions of phones. And the amount of electronics that we all throw away, that people who hate electric cars but drive petrol ones, they've thrown away vast amounts of really valuable material. We cannot keep doing that. We have to recycle everything we dig up. We've got to use it again and again. Show me 1 litre of recycled diesel and I'll change my mind.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell that we're a bit sick of talking about myths, aren't you? But it's important, and
it is important because we're still meeting them out there.
Yes.
The other thing that we always like to touch on as well is that electric cars will get greener because it takes a lot of energy to build one, but the energy can be completely from wind. It can be completely from solar. So actually, if it costs that much energy to build an electric car, but that much energy to make a petrol car, this one could get down to zero. Whereas petrol car is always going to be pollutive because of the stuff that comes out the back.
And I mean, I think that's the long-term argument is you buy a petrol car and it's before it's ever had its engine started, you could say it has a lesser CO2 footprint than an electric one.
Right.
Drive it for 4 years, it's massively more. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how you drive it. It doesn't matter how economic you are. You're burning an irreplaceable fossil fuel. And I don't think we'll ever stop using fossil fuels, but I hope we don't burn as much, that we reduce the burning to the absolute minimum.
So personally, what cars are you looking forward to in the next year or so?
I'll give you 2 categories of cars that I'm really excited about. One is more small, cheap stuff.
Yeah.
So we've done lots of micro cars on the channel, which are fantastic, but just small 4-seater family cars. They've got the Citroen EC3 coming out, €23,300 electric family car, fantastic, the new cheapest. And then the other one, selfishly, is small electric sports cars, 2-seater, lightweight electric sports cars. If you're someone who loves cars, there still isn't that much electric stuff out there to get you really excited about driving it, but we're starting to see a few. And actually one of the first ones is in this hall right now. It's called the Carice TC2, and it's a Dutch-made small lightweight sports car. It's
so lovely. Yeah, beautiful looking car. Very nice.
And you, Robert?
I mean, I think it is the smaller car. So when I have test driven in the past things like the VW Up, the E Up, you know, it was so simple. I'd love to see cars with no sat nav, no flashy electronics, just really, really stripped down to the absolute minimum, but with enough clever software so that when you get in with your phone, it automatically links to your phone. So you have, because our phones update all the time, and our phones are way more advanced than any, electronics in a car, really. Just the most minimal cars, I think, would have there is definitely a gap in the market for that.
Yeah, less screens and just reduce. I think it came to a head when we realised they were just throwing too many toys and gadgets in cars, overcomplicating them, inflating the price.
Yes.
And what we're seeing is the opposite of that trend now, which is a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
I'm sensing that we're seeing a shift in the people who are buying an EV, where it used to be people who are into tech and gadgets, and now it's just regular people who want a good car, and the market can deliver on that.
I sort of know what you mean. I think electric cars are, you interact with them differently, you experience them differently. I think to some degree they might appeal more to people who are into gadgets than people who are into engineering and oily bits. But I'm a lifelong car nerd, and there's electric cars that make me excited, and I think there will always be something for people that are just passionate about cars. Equally, we have to remember that most people don't love cars. Most people just need a car to get them from A to B safely, cheaply, quietly, comfortably. And electric cars are objectively better for that.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that we're so aware of with the live events, which we were quite surprised to see, our viewership on YouTube is really male skewed. It's mostly men that watch it to a huge degree, not at the live shows. So last time when we were in the UK, I made some comments on a panel about men choosing cars and all that, something to do with that, but you know, and I understand why women aren't interested and we're not trying. And I went outside, and this woman literally, she was so angry, she grabbed my coat and she said, I bought the electric car, I bought the solar panels, I bought the special hot water thing. He did nothing, pointing to her husband who was like this. So what we're seeing is women buy cars, and they're not going to be swayed by, very often, not going to be swayed by super flashy, massive screens and all that stuff. They just want a car that's cheap, easy to use, easy to drive, safe, goes far enough, is nice and warm and comfy, which is very sensible.
Yeah, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
Robert, Jack, thank you so much for taking your time to answer these myths.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for your time.
Så blev vi så meget klogere. Spørgsmålet er, om Jack og Roberts britiske virkelighed kan overføres til vores i lille Danmark. Og hvis bare blæren er nogenlunde det samme, så ser det sådan ud. Det vigtigste er i hvert fald, at der ikke er nogen grund til, at du ikke vælger en elbil næste gang. Tak fordi du så med.